Learn the latest news currently involving Raheem Sterling, Nathan Ake and Zinchenko of Man City, as multiple reports in the UK are suggesting that we may be planning a potential triple raid to sign the Man City players. Let's break these stories down. I'll share my thoughts and opinions, and of course you guys, most importantly, share yours as well by commenting and getting involved in this video. Hit that like button, help me get over 2k likes, and without wasting any more time, so let's kick things off. And this report came out from Matt Law of The Telegraph. He focused mainly on Sterling and Nathan Ake, and there was a separate report that came out from the Daily Mail talking about our interest in Zinchenko. So to make things more easier to digest, I'm going to focus on each player in individual segments to make things easier. So we start things off by talking about the latest news involving Raheem Sterling. We know that Todd Boehly has made contact now with Man City, and we are in the negotiation phase at this point in time to get a deal done to sign the player. Still, he isn't the only player that Todd Boehly's inquired about, as he has asked for a valuation now surrounding Nathan Ake. But of course, we know that Thomas Tuchel has already held talks and spoken directly to Sterling. He's reassured the player on how he plans to use him, with talks that Tuchel sees Sterling as a false side option as well as an option down the flanks as well. Sterling has already agreed personal terms, and we are actively looking to get this deal wrapped up by the end of this week, which is very refreshing, because normally as Chelsea fans we're used to these types of stories and sagas unfolding over many weeks, which turn into months, which sometimes turn into no deals happening at the end. So this tells you everything you need to know about how Todd Boehly likes to do business. It seems like this guy ain't here to be wasting time at all. We already understand from previous reports that Raheem Sterling wants his future secured as quickly as possible, because he wants to make sure that he's fully ready and prepared for pre-season, which obviously starts literally in like under 2 weeks time. So it's quite good to know that hopefully we have some more signings, some new signings now, getting involved very early on to have as much time to maximize their form and get used to the system and their new teammates during pre-season. Because during this period, you guys, a lot of players have actually paid the price where they've, signed for the club after pre-season, and it takes you maybe a bit longer than it has to for you to fully acclimatize and get used to your new surroundings. So this is very positive things to hear at this point in time. Currently, we aren't too far away from finding a valuation, which is quite exciting. We're trying to sign him for around 45 million. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually the way to get this deal over the lines is to maybe add more in bonuses or clauses in this deal, which would make a lot of sense too. But right now, it seems like Sterling is set to become the first signing under the new era of Todd Boehly. Very exciting times. So right now, let's move on to Nathan Ake talks. Now, it's not the first time that we've heard that, we have some interest now for Ake. And knowing that Todd Boehly is asking for the valuation for the player is very interesting. I think rumours currently are suggesting that he could be available for between 30 to 35 million pounds, which is reflective of maybe the level he's playing at, the experience he has in the Premier League, of course, and internationally, and many other factors as well too. Now, one of the main reasons behind why Tuchel is in fact interested in him is due to the tactical flexibility the player can bring you. We know that Nathan Ake can play in a multitude of positions. He can play as a DM, he can play in midfield, he can play on the left hand side of a back three, he can play as a left back, and he can play as a wing back as well too. Last season, I guarantee that Tuchel would have loved to have had a player like this. We've already seen that Tuchel is very willing to experiment with the roles that he gives to players. We've seen Ruben play as a wing back. We've seen Hudson-Odoi do that. We've seen Saul play here, play there as well too. So to have a reliable option that can play a multitude of positions to a very good level, of course, does bring a lot of tactical benefits. Tuchel, as Matt Law does state in his report, has been a fan of Ake since his time as a Dortmund manager, where at the time he was actually willing to try and sign him for Dortmund when he was their manager. So he has long-term interest in the player. Reports state that Ake is very much down for this move. He's more than excited to return back to a club in which he, first made his name in professional football. He knows Cobham, he knows a lot of the teammates here as well too. So in that sense, there's a lot of intelligence behind a move like this. He has Premier League experience. He has experience of the way we play as well too. He's come from the club. He has experience, of course, spending time with us. So in that sense, I can see him being a smart buy, but not necessarily the sexy buy that I'm sure a lot of us fans were hoping to see. Now, Matt Law's report, there was a very interesting segment in the article which was doing the rounds on socials. It involves Ake, it involves Reece James, and it involves Jules Koundé. Now, I'm going to tell you guys what it said. Essentially, Matt Law was alluding to the fact that if Koundé was signed, One of the plans behind the player from Thomas Tuchel would be to use him as a wing-back during the first part of the season, with Reece James playing as a right centre-back to allow Jules Koundé to get used to the new league, dynamics and tempo of the Premier League, which is, you know, for my personal just like instant reaction to hearing this and reading this for myself, I thought this is overkill. But at the same time, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know everything about football. I've got no qualifications. I'm just a guy that's very passionate about the sport and, you know, of course does his due diligence to make sure that I can try and back my opinions up, basically. So that means that I have to keep an open mind, and maybe a reason behind why Tuchel would want to use Jules Koundé potentially as a wing-back option during the start of his career is to build some understandings and relationships with, you know, overlapping runs and underlapping runs down that right-hand side. Now, you'd imagine that if he potentially had a right-hand side of Koundé and Reece James, imagine the flexibility where James can pick up inverted positions as well to, like, you know, create with his crosses, but Jules Koundé of course creating the overlapping runs to create that space for Reece James, and also vice versa as well. So it would make a lot of sense from a tactical point of view to build Koundé's confidence playing as a wing back, to get him used to that idea of receiving out wide as Reece James receives in inverted positions. So there's definitely a lot to digest here, but now we have to move on to talking about Zinchenko. Now, this story came from the Daily Mail, and essentially we're trying to ask the valuation too to find out how much the player will cost. The main competition for Zinchenko right now is Everton. Everton see him as a midfield player. We know that Zinchenko, of course, naturally first started his career as like an attacking mid for the Ukrainian national team. He also plays like a box-to-box midfield role. And it's only at Man City, really, that he was converted to playing more as a left back and a wing back. But for me, clubs at the highest level, it only makes sense that they want to have playmaking qualities and tendencies in their wing backs and their full backs. You know, of course, when you're mostly playing against teams that are sitting back and defending, in that sense, the fullbacks for these teams are kind of like ex-midfield players, and they have to be able to influence the game from deeper positions. This is where like their skill set with their passes, their progressive passing, for example, really shines in areas like this, where they can spot a teammate from deep, create space from deep, and of course play balls over the top as well to create unique attacking dimensions. So Zinchenko has really prospered, of course, working under Pep Guardiola all these years. He was only signed for 1.5 million, and he's one of those like super reliable squad players where you can play him in any position, you can turn towards him, and he slots in seamlessly. You don't feel like the teams become weaker, and you don't feel like he becomes targeted by opposition teams as well, which is normally a good sign of the level the player's playing at. So in that sense, if we were looking for more competitive options alongside Ben Chilwell, for example, Zinchenko makes a lot of sense, with a bonus that you could also rely upon him in midfield and other positions as well too. But for me, the reality is simply this: there's no way we'd be signing all three players, absolutely not, unless like Man City gave us like a buy two get one free type of option. But I'd imagine that it's either deciding between Ake or deciding between Zinchenko. What would you guys do in this position right now? Do you think it makes more sense to get a backup or competition wing back, or do you sign Nathan Ake based on the fact that we do need someone down the left-hand side? And for anyone who's like a big fan of Cole, for example, maybe in your head you're also thinking, okay, if I'm Cole, there's a big opportunity for me now to be able to, you know, try and fight for my place to win a first team spot. But I guess first we have to even see if this guy gets a pre-season. So for me, in my opinion, now I'm still quite undecided with Zinchenko. One interesting thing is that when he has more attacking license, so when he has played as like a wing back a few times or left mid for Man City a few times, that extra attacking license he gets, you see like a net benefit in the output that comes from the player, which makes a lot of sense because he is playing like a box-to-box midfield role for the Ukrainian national team. So him playing as a wing back for Ben, he could bring some unique possibilities and be like a reliable member in the squads. But before I finish, you guys, I need to give my conclusion and give my overall thoughts and opinions. Now, let's keep things brutally real. None of these targets are particularly exciting. Like in the case of Raheem Sterling, like he's always one of those players I just kind of knew for years that once he was available, and if he ever did leave Man City, I was never surprised by the fact that he would be a player that we look to turn towards. And of course, we're literally bound to sign him within the next 7 days. But in the case of Ake and Zinchenko, this is where it gets quite interesting. For me, I'm going to focus more on AKE though for my point. Now listen, I'm not here to complain about the player. I'm not here to say he's a bad player. That's false. He's good. And of course, the manager, of course, will see some benefits from AKE that I think he could bring to the overall squad. But I want to just talk about things from a principle point of view. And the overall principle that I can't help but just like shake off is the fact that, you know, really poor management over 24 months where, you know, players like Rudiger and Christensen, they've left us down a free, and essentially the replacements for these two players aren't as good as them. Rudiger and Christensen are world class in my opinion, and they're highly respected in the sport too. No surprise why all the big clubs instantly tried to sign them. And for me, the poor management over the past 24 months to create situations where you didn't just pay up more money a lot earlier on, like literally from 2 summers back, to get their deal sorted. And due to that short-sightedness, you know, you put yourself in a position now where players like Guy and others left the club. You know, to go for Nathan Ake when you had Mark Guy and Tomori, you know, Tomori, Scudetto winner, Scudetto champion, and Guy, one of the best young players in the country as well too. It feels incredibly sideways for me. It kind of feels like this is an opportunistic buy. And it's just like, if we have any hopes of closing the gap on City and Liverpool, 2 teams that continue to grow levels and levels. I mean, for God's sake, Haaland and Nunes signed by both these guys. It's going to take more than just relying on opportunism to be able to beat them and match them and hopefully win this league. You know, you need to have a real strategy. I kind of wish that we had the sporting director to help us during these times. Of course, you know, you back the manager, but with the sporting director, you know, they are the ones that force the will of the boards. You know, they're the ones that impose the philosophy. So if you're going to sign certain players, then you need to make sure they're fulfilling the overall philosophy that the club is trying to build. And I kind of feel like with some of these players we're looking at in particular, even though they will have importance and they will be useful, and I'm really stressing the word useful, they're not going to take us to a higher level. You know, I'm looking at Nathan Ake, for example. Good player, but he's a squad player for his national team, and he's a squad player for Man City as well too. And he was a player that we denied the chance to sign to as well too, to have other targets, because at the time he just wasn't as good as all the options we originally had. So it does kind of feel a little bit like regression, a tiny bit. Maybe I'm sounding too harsh, but I can only speak my thoughts and opinions. And for me, if there was an opportunity for me to sign Mark Guy or Nathan Ake, I'm taking Guy every single day of the week. And, you know, it's even more annoying knowing the fact that he literally would have been a great replacement for us as a left-sided centre-back. And, you know, for me, this is why I want to see more done with really finding pathways for the very best of Cobham grads, not just any Cobham player, the very best of them. Guy was that option, and to think that we're in a solution now where we've kind of lost all the top defenders, you know, the experienced ones or the young ones, and now we're relying upon maybe, you know, experienced squad useful options as replacements. It doesn't give me that much hope or excitement, to keep things brutally real. And to be in a position where I could cynically say, you know, we're literally funding the moves of City's upgrade signings by buying all the squad players that they don't need anymore, it is telling you about the levels we are at this point in time. And for me, I'm just going to put it out there really quickly, this is why my strategy was always to sign, you know, high potential top quality youngsters, like we did with players like Kai Havertz. You know, you sign these guys because if your plan is to challenge in the next like 2, even potentially 3 seasons, you have players young enough that have a high ceiling that can grow, learn and improve as the season comes. And once they've fully matured, you then have a serious team that is ready to, you know, fight for silverware on all fronts. So let's see what happens here with this one, you guys. But on that note, expect more videos to come out later today. Keep those notification buttons on. And of course, share your thoughts and opinions behind these stories too. I'm Nini FC, this is BlueLionsTV. I'll catch you guys later with some more videos. Cool.